What's the most X-Files-like experience you've had in real life? Let me preface this with my morning routine: wake up at 4:30 a.m. Out the door by 5:15 a.m. Clock in at work 5:5 a.m. Never fails unless major traffic incident on the highway. Anyhow, one morning this past August, I am out the door as usual, minimal traffic on the road. Boss calls halfway through my commute. "Hey, you coming in?" And I say, "Yeah, why do you ask?" "Boss, well it's 6:30 a.m. and you usually call if you're going to be late." I look at my dashboard and yup. It's 6:30 a.m. Somewhere between leaving my door and getting on the road I lost about 1 hour. In high school, my pal bounced a bouncy ball in his room so hard, that we never saw it again. We tore that room up, never found it. My cousin and I both remember a room that apparently doesn't exist. When we were both around 10, my cousin was having family problems, and my mom invited her to stay with us while it got sorted out. It was pretty fun, kind of like having a temporary sister. We ended up talking about it a few years ago, reminiscing about the weird things we would do together and some of the memories that stood out the most, among them the night we stayed up laughing at my golden retriever, who kept trying to steal my pillow off the bottom bunk when we were trying to get to sleep. Only problem was, we didn't have a dog, and I never had a bunk bed. For whatever reason, I'd never considered how little sense the memory made. Thinking maybe she was just going along with the story, I asked her what color the bed frame was. She thought about it for a second and then answered red. She was right. According to my mom, we never stayed over at anyone else's house, and even if we had, I still remember what her friends' houses looked like. None of them had red bunk beds. I still have no idea what happened. I have a friend who once told me about a time when he was in his teens. He slept in a bunk bed with his brother in the lower bunk. He said he dreamt a demon wearing the skin of a man threatened to kill his brother. In order to save him, he somehow managed to procure a knife and put the knife to the neck of the demon. The demon tells him, "The only way to rid evil is through evil." He hesitated and woke up to find he was pressing a butcher knife under the neck of his younger brother. He was still sleeping, fortunately, but when he awoke, he told the same dream exactly, except he was attacked by his brother in the dream and said the exact same thing: the only way to rid evil is through evil. Nothing similar happened after that, and it gave him some serious issues that led him to go through psychotherapy for a while. I can't say if it's true or not. As far as I know he made the whole thing up, but I don't think so as he was reluctant to mention it. Ghost car. I worked the overnight shift at an AM radio station back in the 90s. Saw a car come down the driveway to the parking lot. Went out to see who it was and the car was just gone. I would have seen if it had turned around or backed out. Thought I was going nuts until the announcer strolled out of the studio and said, "What happened to that car?" I was 6 and my brother was 10. We had a 21-year-old foster brother who lived with us off and on. One night I woke up to see him standing in the doorway of my room, checking on me. I said his name in a questioning voice. He said, "It's okay. Go back to sleep." Around the same time, my brother woke up in tears. He said he'd had a dream about a night standing on a hill, and it made him feel very sad. Turns out our brother died in a car crash that evening. When I was 19 and my best friend was 20, we are nearly 40 now, we were driving back to my house after visiting someone at work. We were on a somewhat busy road. It was getting dark but wasn't quite dark yet. There were street lights and business lights everywhere, so visibility was still great. This road was 3 lanes in each direction and there was a concrete median dividing the traffic. I was in the left lane next to the median, and a traffic light was coming up. I saw a man standing in the median a good way before where the crosswalk for the light would be. It instantly made me nervous. As soon as I thought that, he stepped out to cross the street. My best friend and I both instantly braced for impact as I slammed on my brakes. We went through him. We didn't hit him, and because there was a car to my right, I wasn't able to swerve out of my lane to avoid hitting the man. I looked in my rear view and there wasn't anyone there. I had come to a complete stop and we physically turned around in our seats to see how he had jumped out of the way. There was no one there and no way he could have ran off or hidden anywhere that fast. We both turned toward to each other and almost in sync asked each other, "Did you see that man?" We both saw the same thing. A man, couldn't describe his face, but it was a man's form, and both of us remember being confused as to why he was wearing a white robe, and both being terrified that he stepped out in front of us, like he was committing suicide. I had a baby in the back seat. She was about 3 months old. She had been crying during the drive and went silent when we came to a screeching stop, which added to the weirdness of it all. We still bring it up occasionally, and neither of us can come up with an explanation for what we saw other than something supernatural. Also, we both saw the white cloth fling across the windshield, like he was hitting it. But there was no impact, nothing. It was like he went through the car. 6 years ago, I was hanging out with my siblings in our yard during a clear, sunny day around high noon, and I suddenly caught something moving in the sky out of the corner of my eye. When I turned to get a better look, I couldn't reconcile what the hell I was seeing. It was a metal cube just gliding through the air pretty high up. I proceeded to absolutely lose my mind, and my sib saw it as well before it disappeared behind some trees. We ran to the other side of the trees, but it was already gone. Still creeps me out to think about. We did live right next to a military base, so make of that what you will. Thing had all the aerodynamics of a literal brick though. I stole a picture from one of the historic houses in Old Town San Diego on Halloween for fun with my girlfriend. Picture was painted in the 1800s. It was Jesus praying in a hallway. Upon closer examination, there was an alternate black devil-looking Jesus hidden in the shadows of the painting. Took it home and put it in the closet. Randomly on nights I would smell the worst smell in the world and wake up and see what looked like a black smoke cloud. I moved 3 times and still saw the same crap. Finally my roommate saw the same thing, so I knew I wasn't crazy. Long story short, I brought the picture back to where I got it and told one of the employees what I did and apologized, and she replied, "Don't worry, they always come back to us." My wife calling my name, nothing unusual about that, except that I did not hear it with my ears, as I was listening to Led Zeppelin's In My Time of Dying on the stereo, and it was cranked up. I heard it in my mind. I walked to the bathroom as I knew my wife was taking a bath. I found her face down in the water. She was unconscious, having suffered an epileptic seizure. Fortunately, I found her in time. I saw my mom holding my baby sister in her arms and taking her to bed. Not weird, right? My mom was still pregnant with my sister at that time. I went to kitchen and saw her still in there. Still pregnant. I didn't even bother going to bedroom to see who just went in there. Just nope. Stay in living room and mind my own business. Oh okay. This one scarred me for a couple of months. When I was in high school, a guy and I got into an argument. He socked me in the jaw, and started to fall to the floor. When I hit the floor, I instantly transported to a dinner table at which I was an adult. There was a woman sitting across from me, with a toddler boy and a preteen girl. I got a good look of my surroundings, a relatively modern house with what looked like 2 floors. I felt like I belonged here, like I had some sort of emotional connection with all the people in the room, especially the kids. Then the woman, my wife, asked me a question. When I opened my mouth, I threw up all over the table and woke up in a stretcher in an ambulance. Hours later, I found out I just had a minor concussion. For a while, I felt like I left a part of my life behind. Even if it was only for a bleak moment in that world. To this day, I can still clearly remember all their faces and what the house looked like. Lost time. My brother was helping me across the country. We borrowed a van and loaded everything up for the last trip. Just before we left, I checked my watch and called my girlfriend that we would be hitting the road soon. My brother checked the kitchen clock but only told me later he did. We set out but couldn't do more than 80 kilometers per hour because of the load. When we took the off-ramp of my new city, my brother told me he couldn't remember the trip. When I thought about it, neither could I. We both thought we were tired and thought nothing of it. However, when we arrived at my new house, my girlfriend asked if I broke the speed limit because we were almost an hour early. When retracing the route, my brother and I both agreed that we can remember passing a certain gas station and nothing thereafter, until the off-ramp. To this day we have no clue what happened during that hour we're missing, or how we could have traveled that fast. Not with any car or van at least. Now at the beginning I wrote we both independently checked for time. This is important for us because one time source could have been wrong but not both. Also, I called before we left, which limits the time we could use to travel. Since then, we have never experienced any weirdness like it or otherwise. I don't have any weird memories or dreams, no pieces of metal lodged under my skin, etc. Just an hour I lost. I once had a dream of this girl I was friends with. She came to me in a dark room and asked me to protect her. I wrapped my arms around her and was warped over top of her in a car she was sleeping. The street lights kept flashing upon her face and everything started spinning, and all I could hear was screaming, until bam, and I woke up covered in scratches, blinding headache, could barely get out of bed, my back and ribs hurt so bad I could hardly breathe, had a mouth full of blood. I got online and messaged her every single detail. 2 days later she messaged back telling me that's the creepiest effing thing she's ever read and couldn't believe it. She was on a car trip to North Carolina with a friend and he fell asleep at the wheel, and the car rolled into the woods and hit a tree. He spent 6 months in the hospital. She was only there for a week. She's only like 4'11", 120 pounds. It's a miracle she wasn't hurt worse. When I was 12 I spent the night at a friend's house. We were up late chatting, falling asleep listening to some music, Hotel California, and suddenly the music stopped. A bright blue light shined into the bedroom window, lit the room up then dissipated. Hotel California resumed like nothing happened. We were frozen, dumbfounded and freaked out, getting lots of chills and feeling weird. Did you see that? I reluctantly got out of bed to peek outside, nothing there but an empty parking lot by a wooded area. I looked at the clock. It said 2:14. For the next couple years it became somewhat of an urban legend among my friends. We'd stay up until 2:14 at each other's house and dare something to happen like that again. Lots of fun scaring ourselves, but nothing happened. It just became known as 2 to 14 and we'd joke about it whenever we saw that it was 2:14. 2 years later I was at a different friend's house, up late watching movies in the living room, Hot Dog the movie. It was over and we shut off the TV and were just chatting like normal, falling asleep. Suddenly a bright white light shined into the living room window, lighting up the place, then dissipating just like the blue light from 2 years before. I immediately was struck with fear. Did you see that? My friend replied, yeah. I was filled with dread as I turned over to get a view of the VCR to see what time it was, my body covered in chills with anticipation. It was 2:14. My whole body was covered with shivers, my eyes watering, just freaking out. I already knew I didn't need to get up to look out the window, my friend's backyard is just all woods. Nothing could be back there. Suffice to say, with 2 different witnesses to go along with myself, 2:14 was a confirmed real thing in my life and I've been haunted by it ever since. Nothing like it has happened since, but it sure did color my adolescence, and make me intrigued and fascinated by all things paranormal, unexplainable, weird, fantastic, etc. It was no surprise I became a huge X-Files fan. This happened when I was either 8 or 9. It involves a weird incident with my twin brother, and for a long time afterwards I thought I had dreamt it. So, it was early evening after the sun had gone down, and I was downstairs in the living room watching TV. My brother was up in our bedroom reading. At some point this really uncomfortable feeling came over me, and I thought that my brother needed my help. I go upstairs, and our bedroom at the time was at the end of the hallway. As I walk down the hallway, and I'm standing right outside our door, and right as I go to knock, I hear a voice say, "I have to leave now." He opened the door, said, I think someone was outside the window talking to me, but the only thing I heard was that they had to leave. We were both creeped out, and told our mom what happened, but nothing ever came of it. For a long time, I thought I had dreamt this, but a few years ago my brother asked me, "Hey, remember that time when we were kids and someone was talking to me through the bedroom window? Remember how he left right when you came in the room? What the hell was that?" Because he remembers it exactly the way I do, I'm convinced this really happened. Hoo boy, this still wigs me out. I was driving back from a 16-hour road trip to see family and I was about an hour from home. The whole trip was just 4 days long, so I was pretty sleep deprived and had been driving by myself with very few stops. I was cruising on the highway and in front of me was a tunnel through the mountains. I hadn't driven through a tunnel on the way out of the state, so I became alarmed I had been driving the wrong way. I checked my GPS but had no signal on my phone. Unusual, the whole trip I normally have signal. I immediately took the exit before the tunnel to get my bearings. It was a big circle exit and at the end was a four-way stop with a flashing traffic light. I took a left and the only thing around was a small 50s-style diner and a parking lot. All the lights were off in the diner, obviously closed, but the parking lot was full of cars. Like, packed. There were old classic cars and new cars but there was not a single soul to be seen. It was around 3 a.m., so I didn't expect a crowd, but there wasn't a hotel or homes nearby. Just a closed diner and parking lot full of cars. I didn't even slow down. I effing noped out of there so hard. Pulled away in the street and drove back to the on-ramp to the highway. Once I was back on the highway, I drove for about 30 minutes until the GPS came back. I was actually pretty close to home. My friend and I once drove back to try and find the diner but we never could find it, or the tunnel. I like to think that if I would have pulled into the parking lot, my car might have been added to the collection, and no one would have seen me again. Driving to Binghamton, New York many years ago on the highway, coming around a bend, over a hill to my right. A bright gold metallic object falling slowly from the sky a few miles away. It fell like origami over itself and folded and unfolded randomly in multiple places like it was working its way to Earth. This was in the early afternoon. First I thought it was a weather balloon, but it was huge and ridged and very angular, changing shapes as it fell very considerably. Still have no idea